The beast had survived 100 battles. Its white fur had carried the blood of kings, monsters, and warriors across half the northern kingdoms, yet no hand had ever been allowed to wipe away even a single crimson stain. Men who had fought beside it for years stepped back whenever it returned from war. Royal healers laid out medicine from a distance before quietly retreating. Even the Alpha King, whose command could move armies and shake kingdoms, never forced the creature to accept comfort. He always disappeared into the wilderness alone. He always returned when it was ready. Until one evening, the war ended beneath a sky painted with smoke and fading sunlight. Broken shields rested among trampled snow, and the wind carried the smell of pine mixed with iron. Across that silent battlefield walked a young woman carrying nothing more dangerous than a wooden bucket filled with warm water. She had no sword and no armor, no royal name. Only gentle hands that had spent a lifetime healing creatures everyone else had forgotten. Before dawn, every fire across the kingdom of Frosthaven would burn with the same impossible story. The Alpha King's legendary beast had bowed its head, for her. Winter ruled the northern kingdom of Frosthaven with quiet strength. Its mountains stood like sleeping giants beneath blankets of endless snow, while ancient pine forests stretched across valleys where wolves still sang beneath the moon. Rivers cut through the frozen land like silver ribbons, feeding villages built from dark stone and cedar wood. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, carrying the comforting scent of burning oak into the crisp morning air. Life here was never easy. People learned to survive before they learned to dream. Children carried firewood almost as soon as they could walk. Farmers battled frozen soil every season. Hunters disappeared into forests where the trees themselves seemed old enough to remember forgotten kings. Yet despite the hardships, Frosthaven remained beautiful. Especially when sunrise painted the snow in shades of gold and pale pink, making the kingdom appear as though the heavens themselves had descended upon the earth. Far from the royal capital, hidden beside the edge of elderpine forest, stood a tiny cottage surrounded by wild herbs and wooden fences patched together countless times. It belonged to Alara, or rather, it had belonged to the old woman who had found her years ago. No one knew where the child had come from. One stormy winter night, an elderly herbalist named Malin had discovered a crying infant wrapped inside worn grey blankets beneath the roots of an ancient cedar tree. No family, no let, no name. Only bright silver eyes that refused to close despite the freezing wind. Malin had taken the child home without asking the village elder for permission. Some gifts, she often said while stirring herbs over the fireplace, arrive without explanation. She named the little girl Alara. Years passed. The old healer taught her everything she knew: which roots eased fever, which flowers stopped bleeding, which mushrooms healed infected wounds, which leaves soothed frightened horses after lightning storms, but more importantly, she taught kindness. Pain speaks every language, Malin would whisper while bandaging an injured fox. If you learn to answer it with gentleness, even the wildest heart may choose trust. Alara never forgot those words. When she was only 10 years old, villagers found her sitting beside a wounded wolf pup caught inside a hunter's trap. Everyone shouted for her to run. Instead, she carefully opened the trap with frozen fingers until the frightened little animal limped away into the trees. Another winter, she spent 3 days nursing an exhausted raven whose wing had shattered against icy cliffs. When spring finally arrived, the bird circled above the cottage every morning before disappearing into the mountains. Some villagers admired her, others called her foolish. One day those beasts will repay your kindness with sharp teeth, they warned. Alara only smiled. If they're hurting, she would quietly answer, they're thinking about surviving, not hurting me. By the time she reached her 20th winter, kindness had become as natural as breathing. Her hands carried tiny scars from years of gathering herbs among thorn bushes. Her boots had crossed nearly every forest path surrounding the village. Her basket was almost never empty. Sometimes it carried medicine. Sometimes fresh bread for lonely elders. Sometimes tiny rabbits rescued after snowstorms. Whatever the day demanded. She never questioned whether someone deserved help, only whether she could offer it. That winter, however, Frosthaven changed. War arrived. It began with rumors carried by merchants traveling south. Border villages burned. Trade roads closed. Young men disappeared from homes carrying swords instead of farming tools. Soon royal messengers rode through every settlement beneath the banner of the White Wolf. The neighboring kingdom of Black Hollow had crossed the northern pass. The Alpha King answered with war. For months the kingdom echoed with marching soldiers. Blacksmiths worked. Through the night, church bells rang for sons who never returned. The forests grew strangely quiet. Even birds seemed to understand something terrible had awakened. Ilara rarely saw the battles. She witnessed something else. The cost. Broken wagons arrived carrying wounded soldiers whose armor had frozen to their skin. Horses stumbled into villages without riders. Dogs waited outside empty homes long after their masters had fallen. Every day brought more suffering. Every day brought more work. She moved. From bed to bed beside Malin, cleaning wounds until sunrise, boiling herbs through endless nights, comforting frightened children who searched every face for fathers who would never return. Then, one cold evening, Malin quietly set down the bowl she had been holding. Her tired hands trembled. Her breathing became shallow. Years of caring for others had quietly stolen the strength from her own body. She smiled at Ilara across the warm glow of the fireplace. "The world will always need gentle hands," she whispered. "They're rarer than brave ones." By morning, she was gone. Snow drifted silently across the cottage roof as Ilara buried the only mother she had ever known beneath the ancient cedar tree where they had first found one another. No grand ceremony, no priests. Only the whispering wind, and a single white feather drifting onto the fresh earth. For several days she barely spoke. The cottage felt impossibly quiet. The fireplace still burned, the herbs still hung drying from the ceiling. Everything remained exactly where Malin had left it. Except, the laughter had disappeared. Yet grief did not stop the world. People still became sick. Animals still wandered into the forest injured. Life continued asking for compassion, so Ilara continued giving it. One afternoon, nearly 3 weeks after Malin's passing, distant bells echoed from the direction of the capital. Not funeral bells, victory bells. The war had ended. Villagers celebrated. Children danced through falling snow. Ale flowed freely. Men embraced one another beneath colorful banners. Someone shouted that the Alpha King had defeated Black Hollow during a final battle near Frostvale Ridge. Cheers filled every street. But Ilara noticed something everyone else ignored. Victory wagons were returning. They were full, not with treasure, with wounded soldiers. With exhausted horses. With broken hunting hawks, with creatures that had carried men through battle and now lay forgotten beneath blood-stained blankets. Celebration and suffering had arrived together. Before sunrise the following morning, Ilara packed fresh bandages, healing herbs, clean cloth, dried bread, and 2 wooden buckets. She left the village without telling anyone where she was going. The road toward Frostvale Ridge climbed steadily into the mountains. Cold wind swept across frozen cliffs, carrying faint echoes of ravens overhead. Snow crunched beneath her boots. The deeper she walked, the quieter the world became. Hours later, the smell reached her first. Smoke. Burned leather, iron death. The battlefield stretched across the valley like a terrible scar. Broken wagons leaned against shattered trees. Spears jutted from the snow. Abandoned shields reflected the pale afternoon light. Silence covered everything, not peaceful silence. The heavy silence left behind after too many voices had disappeared forever. Ilara moved carefully between fallen banners, searching for any sign of life. Here, a frightened horse trapped beneath broken wood. There, a young soldier still breathing. She treated everyone she could. Time slipped away unnoticed. The sun drifted lower behind distant mountains. Long shadows stretched across the frozen earth. Then, something caught her eye. A single line of crimson drops disappearing into the forest beyond the battlefield. Not human footprints. Much larger. Each print sank deeply into the snow. Something enormous had walked here. Recently. The blood remained bright against the white ground. Ilara hesitated. The villagers' warnings echoed faintly inside her mind. Predators followed blood. So did death. Yet another memory rose above every fearful thought. Pain speaks every language. She tightened her cloak around her shoulders and quietly followed the trail into the gathering mist. The forest swallowed every sound except the whisper of swaying pines. The trail grew darker. The blood became heavier. Then, she stepped into a small clearing. Her breath stopped. Lying beneath torn royal banners and broken armor rested the largest wolf she had ever seen. Its white fur, almost glowing beneath the fading evening light, had been stained deep crimson from neck to tail. Massive paws rested motionless against the frozen ground. One side rose only slightly with each painful breath. Golden eyes slowly opened. They found hers. Neither moved. The cold wind passed silently between them. Every story she had ever heard claimed this creature was the Alpha King's legendary battle beast. The guardian of Frosthaven. The animal that had ended wars. The beast no one dared approach. Its enormous head lifted only an inch. Not to attack. Only to look at her. And in those tired golden eyes, beneath all the blood and legend, Ilara saw something she recognized immediately. Not fury. Not hunger. Only pain. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind that had whispered through the towering pines only moments before now drifted away, leaving behind a silence so complete that Ilara could hear the slow rhythm of the beast's breathing. Each breath sounded heavier than the last, carrying a faint rasp that spoke of exhaustion far deeper than any wound visible upon its body. She remained where she was. Not because she feared the creature. Because she understood fear. Every frightened animal she had ever rescued had taught her the same lesson. The first step belonged to trust, not to courage. The enormous wolf studied her with unblinking golden eyes. Those eyes held neither the wild panic of hunted prey nor the sharp challenge of a predator guarding its territory. Instead, they carried something ancient. Weariness. The kind that settled into a soul after surviving too many winters. Slowly. Very slowly. Ilara lowered herself onto one knee. She did not reach toward the beast. She simply rested her wooden bucket upon the snow and spoke in the same calm voice she had once used to comfort trembling foals during thunderstorms. "I won't force you." The words floated gently into the cold air. "If you wish me to leave, I will." The wolf remained silent. Its ears did not flatten. Its lips did not curl. Instead, its breathing softened ever so slightly. Ilara waited. Another heartbeat passed. Then another. Only when the great beast made no effort to pull away did she move one careful hand toward the bucket. Steam still rose from the warm water she had collected from a nearby spring before entering the forest. She dipped a clean linen cloth into it, squeezed away the excess water, and looked once more into those golden eyes. "I know it hurts." The wolf closed its eyes. It was the smallest movement. Yet somehow, it felt like permission. Ilara reached forward. Her hand trembled only once before becoming perfectly steady. The warm cloth touched the thick white fur along the creature's shoulder. Nothing happened. No growl. No snap of powerful jaws. Only the slow release of a breath that seemed to carry away the weight of an entire battlefield. Dark crimson spread into the cloth. The water inside the bucket slowly turned pink. Stroke after gentle stroke, she washed away layers of dried blood that had hidden the wolf's true coat beneath a scarlet shell. The fur beneath shone like fresh snow beneath moonlight. Only then did she begin to see the real wounds. Long cuts crossed its broad shoulders. One deep gash reached across its ribs where a jagged spear had barely missed its heart. Smaller injuries covered its legs, each telling the story of another enemy defeated. Some wounds had already begun to freeze. Others still bled slowly into the snow. No ordinary creature should have remained alive after suffering so much. Ilara's eyes filled with quiet sorrow. "What did they do to you?" She whispered the question without expecting an answer. The beast simply lay still. Its ears flicked once as if listening to her voice more than her words. She worked carefully, cleaning each wound before applying crushed herbs mixed into a thick green paste. The scent of pine resin, lavender root, and mountain sage slowly replaced the sharp smell of blood. Minutes became an hour. The fading sunlight disappeared behind distant peaks. Blue shadows stretched across the clearing. Above them, the first evening stars quietly appeared. Still she worked. Every movement carried patience instead of urgency. Every touch asked permission. She had forgotten the cold. Forgotten the long journey. Forgotten that this creature had become the subject of countless frightening legends. All she could see now was another living soul trying to survive. Hidden high among the snow-covered branches, 3 royal scouts watched in complete disbelief. None of them dared speak above a whisper. Is that? It cannot be. The Guardian. The oldest scout slowly lowered the spyglass from his eyes. His weathered face had gone pale. I've served the crown for 28 years, he breathed. I watched His Majesty raise that beast from a cub. Another scout frowned. I've never seen anyone this close. No one has. The old man's voice remained barely audible. Not after battle. All 3 remembered the same stories. When the guardian beast returned from war, it vanished into the wilderness alone. No healer had ever touched it. No stable master had ever brushed its fur. Even the Alpha King himself waited until the beast chose to return to the castle. It trusted no one while carrying the scent of battle. Yet below them, a young village woman gently cleaned blood from its coat as though she had done so 100 times before. None of it made sense. One of the younger scouts quietly reached for his horse. We have to tell the king. The old scout nodded without taking his eyes off the clearing. Ride. The young man disappeared through the forest as fast as the snow-covered trails allowed. The remaining scouts stayed hidden. Neither wished to interrupt what felt less like an ordinary moment, and more like witnessing history. Back in the clearing, Ilara finally reached the beast's massive head. Its thick fur around the neck had become tangled with dried blood. Some patches had hardened into dark knots. She dipped another cloth into fresh warm water. Slowly, patiently, she loosened each stain until white fur emerged once more beneath the crimson. The wolf never flinched. Instead, its breathing settled into a peaceful rhythm. Every few moments, its ears twitched toward the sound of her voice whenever she quietly hummed an old song Malin had loved. She could barely remember the words now. Only the melody remained. Soft, gentle, comforting. It blended with the whispering pines until the forest itself seemed to sing beside her. At last, only one final patch of blood remained. It covered the broad forehead between the creature's eyes. Ilara smiled faintly. There you are. She reached up. The cloth brushed softly across its brow. The last crimson stain disappeared. For the first time since the battle, the guardian beast stood revealed in all its breathtaking beauty. Its coat gleamed pure white beneath the rising moon. Silver light spilled across its powerful frame until it looked less like a creature of flesh and bone, and more like something carved from winter itself. Ilara quietly sat back on her heels. There. Her tired smile carried quiet satisfaction. That's better. The beast slowly opened its eyes. Those golden eyes no longer looked clouded by pain. Instead, they seemed almost peaceful. For several long seconds, it simply watched her. Then something happened that no living soul had ever witnessed. The enormous wolf struggled onto its feet. Its muscles trembled from exhaustion. Ilara instinctively reached out to steady it, then stopped herself, remembering that wild creatures chose their own distance. The guardian beast took one slow step forward. Then another. Its towering body cast a long shadow across the moonlit snow. It stopped directly in front of her. Ilara remained perfectly still. She could feel the warmth of its breath against her face. The creature lowered its great head. Lower. Lower still. Until its forehead gently rested against her shoulder. A quiet breath escaped its chest. Not a growl. Not a howl. Almost a sigh. Ilara closed her eyes. Without thinking, she lifted one hand and slowly rested it behind the wolf's ear. Its thick fur felt impossibly soft beneath her fingers. For a heartbeat, the world disappeared. No kingdom. No war. No fear. Only a wounded guardian finding peace beside someone who had expected nothing in return. Hidden among the trees, even the hardened royal scouts felt their throats tighten. The oldest quietly whispered words he had never believed he would speak. The prophecy. The second scout looked toward him. You believe it now? The old man never answered. He simply watched the impossible unfold beneath the moon. The guardian beast remained beside Ilara for several peaceful minutes before the long struggle against pain finally claimed what little strength it had left. Its legs weakened. Its body leaned heavily against her. Oh! Ilara gently supported its massive head as best she could. You don't have to stand anymore. The wolf obeyed almost immediately. Slowly, it lowered itself onto the soft snow beside her. Its head remained resting against her shoulder. Within moments, its breathing deepened. The great guardian of Frosthaven, the creature that had terrified entire armies, had fallen asleep. Ilara smiled to herself. You've earned your rest. She leaned back against an old pine tree, pulling her cloak over both herself and the sleeping beast's wounded neck to shield it from the growing cold. She had no intention of leaving it alone. Not tonight. High above, clouds drifted away from the moon. Silver light poured into the clearing. The snow sparkled like scattered stars around them. Far in the distance, a lone wolf's howl echoed across the mountains. Then another answered. Then silence returned. By dawn, the story of the impossible bond would already be racing toward Frosthaven Castle. And before another sunset arrived, the quiet healer who had spent her life rescuing forgotten creatures would find herself standing before the most powerful ruler in the northern kingdoms. She did not know it yet, but her life had changed forever. Morning arrived quietly. The first light of dawn slipped through the towering pines, turning the snow into a sea of silver that shimmered beneath the pale sky. Frost clung to every branch like tiny crystals, and a gentle breeze carried the clean scent of cedar through the forest. Ilara woke to warmth. For a confused moment, she thought she was still beside the fireplace in Malin's cottage. Then she opened her eyes. The guardian beast still lay beside her. Sometime during the night, the great wolf had shifted closer, curling its enormous body around her as though shielding her from the freezing wind. Its thick white fur had become a living wall against the cold. A faint smile touched her lips. So that's why I wasn't freezing. Carefully, she slipped out from beneath its protective side. The wolf's ears twitched. Golden eyes slowly opened. For one long heartbeat, they simply looked at one another. The fierce hardness that stories had always spoken of was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was quiet recognition. Ilara checked the bandages she had wrapped around its wounds. The herbs had done their work well. The bleeding had stopped. The swelling had eased. You'll still need time, she whispered while replacing one strip of linen. No one heals from a battle in one night. The guardian watched her work without moving. Then its nose gently nudged the empty water bucket resting beside her feet. She laughed softly. So you're thirsty. She carried the bucket toward the nearby spring. The water flowed beneath a thin layer of ice, clear enough to reflect the pale morning sky. As she knelt to fill the bucket, the peaceful silence shattered. The distant sound of hooves echoed through the forest. One rider. Then several more. Soon the steady rhythm became impossible to mistake. An entire mounted patrol. The guardian beast lifted its head immediately. Its ears stood tall. Its body tensed, not with fear, but with readiness. Ilara instinctively placed one gentle hand against its shoulder. It's all right. The wolf glanced toward her. Then, almost surprisingly, it relaxed. Moments later, royal soldiers emerged between the trees. Their armor gleamed beneath the morning sun. White wolf emblems decorated their dark cloaks, while polished spears reflected flashes of light through the forest. At their front rode an older captain whose beard had turned almost entirely silver. His horse slowed the instant he entered the clearing. Every soldier behind him froze. None of them had prepared for what they now witnessed. The guardian beast, calmly sitting beside an ordinary village woman. The captain slowly dismounted. Every movement carried cautious respect. He lowered his sword before stepping forward. His eyes never left the great wolf. Guardian. The creature merely watched him. No growl. No warning. Only quiet observation. The captain swallowed. I've served His Majesty for 32 years. His voice remained almost reverent. I have never stood this close to you after battle. One younger soldier whispered behind him. Captain, is she using magic? The old captain answered without looking away. No. How can you know? Because magic forces. He slowly turned toward Ilara. What happened here? Was given. The young soldier fell silent. The captain finally addressed Ilara directly. "You are Ilara of Elderpine Village?" She nodded. I am Captain Rowan of the Royal Guard." He bowed his head. Not deeply, but enough to surprise every soldier standing behind him. "His Majesty requests your presence." Ilara blinked. "My presence?" "The Alpha King wishes to meet the woman trusted by his oldest companion." She looked toward the guardian beast. "I can't leave him." Captain Rowan's expression softened. "I had hoped you would say that." He smiled faintly. His Majesty expected as much. He stepped aside. "Then both of you will come." The journey toward Frosthaven Castle began before midday. Snow continued falling in slow, peaceful flakes as the royal company traveled through mountain roads carved into towering cliffs. The guardian beast refused every horse offered for transport. Instead, it walked beside Ilara. Always beside her. If she slowed, it slowed. If she stopped, so did it. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances throughout the journey. No one dared walk between them. The youngest among them whispered stories they had heard as children. Some believed the guardian beast had been born beneath the first winter moon. Others claimed it had once defeated an entire army alone. One man quietly admitted he had always believed the stories were exaggerated. Now, watching the creature gently match its pace to a healer carrying herbs, he no longer knew what to believe. As afternoon faded, the mountain road opened onto the greatest sight Ilara had ever witnessed. Frosthaven Castle. It rose from the highest cliff overlooking the kingdom like something carved directly from winter itself. Massive stone walls surrounded its towers. Blue banners embroidered with silver wolves danced proudly in the wind. Frozen waterfalls shimmered along the outer cliffs, catching the sunlight until the entire fortress seemed wrapped in crystal. Smoke drifted from dozens of chimneys. Church bells echoed through the valley below. People filled the streets beyond the gates. Merchants, blacksmiths, children chasing one another through fresh snow. For a brief moment, life appeared peaceful. Until someone noticed the guardian beast. A woman carrying bread stopped walking. A little boy pointed toward the enormous white wolf. Conversations faded. Within seconds, the entire marketplace had fallen silent. Eyes followed the strange procession. Not because the guardian had returned. It had done so many times before. But because it walked beside a young woman whose simple wool cloak looked hopelessly out of place among royal banners. Whispers spread faster than winter wind. Who is she? Is she a noble? Did the king send for a healer? No. Someone nearer the gate whispered in disbelief. The guardian is following her. The castle gates slowly opened. Their ancient iron hinges groaned beneath the weight. Captain Rowan guided the company into the royal courtyard. Servants stopped carrying firewood. Stable boys abandoned their work. Even experienced knights stared openly. Every face reflected the same impossible question. Why? The guardian beast ignored them all. Its attention remained fixed upon Ilara. Royal attendants hurried forward. One elderly woman approached carrying folded blankets. My lady. Ilara looked behind herself. The woman smiled kindly. I'm speaking to you. Ilara almost laughed. I'm not a lady. Perhaps not. The servant glanced toward the guardian beast. But I have a feeling this castle may soon disagree. Before Ilara could answer, heavy oak doors opened. Captain Rowan bowed respectfully. His Majesty awaits. The great throne hall stretched farther than Ilara could have imagined. Tall pillars of carved stone reached toward vaulted ceilings painted with ancient battles. Long windows allowed cold winter light to spill across polished floors. Enormous braziers filled the room with the scent of burning cedar. At the far end stood the throne. Not covered in gold. Not decorated with jewels. It had been carved from dark mountain stone. Simple. Strong. Unyielding. Upon it sat the Alpha King. King Aldrich of Frosthaven. He appeared younger than Ilara had expected. Perhaps 40 winters. Broad-shouldered. His dark cloak rested over battered armor that still carried fresh scratches from war. A long scar crossed one side of his face from temple to jaw, yet it did nothing to diminish the calm strength in his features. He did not look like a ruler born into comfort. He looked like a man who had carried the weight of an entire kingdom upon his shoulders for far too long. His grey eyes quietly studied Ilara. Not with suspicion. With curiosity. Around him stood generals, advisors, nobles, priests, and scholars. Every gaze settled upon the young healer. Silence filled the hall. Then, the High Chancellor stepped forward. His robes shimmered with expensive embroidery. His smile never reached his eyes. Lord Malrek. The most powerful man in the kingdom after the king himself. He bowed slightly. Your Majesty. His voice flowed as smoothly as polished glass. We must proceed carefully. King Aldrich remained silent. Malrek continued. This woman appeared from nowhere. His eyes settled upon Ilara. Yet somehow she accomplished what no healer, warrior, or beastmaster has achieved in decades. Several nobles nodded. Perhaps, Malrek said carefully, we should first determine what kind of magic she practices. The words struck the hall like falling ice. Murmurs spread immediately. Ilara looked genuinely confused. I don't know magic. One noble scoffed. Convenient. Another stepped forward. No ordinary villager earns the Guardian's trust. A priest slowly crossed himself. Perhaps darker powers are involved. Ilara's hands tightened around the small leather satchel holding her herbs. I only cleaned his wounds. Her quiet voice barely carried across the hall. He was hurting. Several nobles exchanged doubtful glances. Malrek smiled faintly. You expect us to believe that kindness alone accomplished this miracle. I don't know if it was a miracle. Ilara answered honestly. I simply couldn't leave him there. Before another accusation could be spoken, a deep sound echoed through the throne room. Heavy footsteps. Everyone turned. The enormous doors behind Ilara slowly opened. The guardian beast entered the hall. Every noble instinctively stepped backward. Several guards reached for their swords. The creature ignored every one of them. Its golden eyes swept calmly across the crowded chamber. Then, without hesitation, it walked past generals who had fought beside it, past royal healers, past priests, past the throne itself, until it reached Ilara. The great white wolf lowered its massive body beside her feet, then gently rested its head against her shoulder. The throne room froze. No one breathed. No one spoke. Even Lord Malrek's confident smile vanished. King Aldrich slowly rose from his throne. His eyes remained fixed upon the impossible sight before him. For the first time in many years, the king looked not like a ruler, but like a man whose understanding of the world had just been shattered. And somewhere deep within the castle walls, behind locked doors buried beneath ancient stone, a secret that had slept for generations was beginning to awaken. Silence settled over the throne room like fresh snow covering a battlefield. No one dared move. The crackling of cedar logs inside the great braziers suddenly sounded impossibly loud, and somewhere high above, winter wind sighed through the narrow stained-glass windows. King Aldrich slowly descended the stone steps leading from his throne. Each measured footstep echoed across the polished floor. He did not hurry. He did not speak. His grey eyes remained fixed on the guardian beast resting peacefully beside Ilara, its massive head leaning lightly against her shoulder as though it had found the one place in the world where it no longer needed to stand guard. The king stopped only a few paces away. For years, he had fought beside this creature. He had watched it charge through impossible battles, tear through enemy lines, and carry wounded soldiers from fields where hope itself had nearly died. Yet never, not once, had he seen it seek comfort from another soul. He looked toward Ilara. You truly expected nothing from it. His voice carried no accusation, only quiet curiosity. Ilara met his gaze without lowering her eyes. I expected it to survive. The answer came so naturally that it seemed almost too simple for such a grand hall. If someone is suffering. She gently rested one hand against the guardian's neck. You help first. The king stood silent. Around him, nobles shifted uneasily. Some frowned. Others looked away. The simplicity of her answer somehow felt heavier than the finest speeches delivered before the royal court. Lord Malrek stepped forward once more. His expression remained calm, but beneath that polished calmness, irritation had begun to crack. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly, "compassion is admirable." He glanced briefly toward Ilara. "But kingdoms are not ruled by compassion alone." King Aldrich did not answer. Malrek continued. "We cannot ignore the danger before us. The Guardian has never behaved this way. If an ancient force has influenced it, then our first duty is protecting the throne." Several nobles nodded quickly. Fear was easier to follow than hope. One elderly lord spoke next. "The Chancellor is right." Another added, "We know nothing about this woman." A third whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "Magic often hides behind innocence." Ilara looked around the chamber. Not with anger. Only sadness. She recognized those expressions. She had seen them before whenever frightened villagers discovered wolves near their homes. People feared what they did not understand. The Guardian slowly raised its head. Its golden eyes settled upon the nobles speaking against her. A deep rumble vibrated quietly within its chest. Not loud. Not threatening. Just enough. Instantly the entire room fell silent. The beast lowered its head once again. The message had been delivered without violence. King Aldrich allowed the silence to linger. Finally, he spoke. "Captain Rowan." The old captain stepped forward. "Yes, Your Majesty." "You observed everything yourself." "I did." "And what did you see?" The captain glanced toward Ilara before answering. "I saw no spells. No rituals. No commands." He paused. "I saw a woman who treated the Guardian exactly as she would have treated an injured lamb." A faint smile almost appeared on the king's face. Almost. Lord Malrek remained expressionless. Inside, however, unease had begun tightening around his thoughts. The prophecy. For years he had dismissed it as an old tale whispered by monks too fond of forgotten legends. Yet now, too many pieces were beginning to fall into place. His mind drifted back to words hidden inside an ancient manuscript locked beneath the royal archives. "When the Guardian bows before a heart untouched by ambition, hidden truth shall rise, and false crowns shall tremble." He had burned every copy he could find. Or so he believed. If the prophecy still lived, everything he had built could collapse. He bowed politely. "Your Majesty." The king looked toward him. "I request permission to examine our archives." "For what purpose?" "To ensure no forgotten curse threatens the kingdom." King Aldrich studied him for several quiet seconds. "Granted." Malrek bowed once more. His face remained composed. Only his eyes betrayed the smallest flicker of urgency. By evening, Ilara was given a small chamber overlooking the castle gardens. It was larger than the entire cottage she had shared with Malin. A fire already burned inside the stone hearth. Fresh blankets rested upon a neatly prepared bed. A servant placed warm bread, vegetable stew, and herbal tea upon a wooden table. "If you need anything." The elderly woman smiled kindly. "Simply ring the bell." After she left, Ilara stood quietly in the middle of the room. Everything felt unfamiliar. The polished wooden furniture. The embroidered curtains. The gentle glow of candlelight reflecting across polished stone walls. Luxury surrounded her. Yet somehow, it made her miss the little cottage more than ever. She walked toward the window. Snow drifted peacefully through the evening sky. Far below, castle workers carried firewood between buildings while stable boys brushed weary horses that had returned from war. Her eyes followed them. Then, she noticed movement near the royal stables. Several horses stood apart from the others. They lowered their heads weakly. Bandages covered their sides. No one attended them. Without another thought, Ilara picked up her satchel of herbs and quietly left her room. The stable smelled of hay, leather, and damp cedar. Lanterns swung gently from heavy wooden beams. Most workers had already gone home. Only one elderly stable master remained, carefully cleaning an old saddle. He looked up in surprise. My lady. I'm not a lady. She smiled gently. I heard the horses were injured. The old man sighed. They carried our soldiers home. His weathered hand rested against the neck of a grey mare. They've been waiting their turn. Ilara looked down the long stable. Nearly a dozen horses stood quietly. Some limped. Others carried deep cuts beneath their blankets. One young colt refused to eat altogether. She set down her satchel. Let's begin. The stable master blinked. Now. They've already waited long enough. 4 hours, she moved from stall to stall, cleaning wounds, replacing dirty bandages, mixing herbs into warm feed, speaking softly to frightened animals that flinched whenever someone approached too quickly. The stable master watched in silence. He had worked with horses for over 40 years. He had seen skilled healers, talented trainers, experienced veterinarians, but never someone who treated every creature as though it mattered, not because it served the kingdom, simply because it was alive. When the frightened colt finally accepted its first mouthful of food, the old man quietly wiped moisture from his eyes before pretending to inspect a lantern. You remind me of my wife. Ilara looked up. She always believed kindness could outlive sorrow. His voice cracked. I didn't believe her. He smiled faintly. I think she would have liked you. Word spread through the castle faster than snow blown across frozen fields. The mysterious healer had not asked for gold. She had not sought favor. Instead, she spent her evenings tending forgotten horses. The next morning, wounded hunting hounds were brought to her. By afternoon, injured falcons arrived from the royal aviary. Then servants quietly began seeking her help. A kitchen maid whose father still suffered from an infected wound. An elderly gardener whose hands had swollen from years of winter labor. Children carrying injured birds wrapped inside scarves. Ilara refused none of them. She treated everyone with the same gentle patience. Soon, people stopped calling her the strange woman. They began calling her the gentle healer. From the highest balcony overlooking the courtyard, King Aldrich watched quietly. Below, Ilara knelt beside a little girl whose pet rabbit had injured its leg. The child looked ready to cry. Ilara smiled. She wrapped the tiny leg carefully before placing the rabbit back into the girl's arms. Moments later, the child laughed. The sound floated upward through the cold air. The king remained still. Captain Rowan stepped beside him. You've been watching her every day. Aldrich nodded. I've spent half my life believing strength came from making difficult choices. His gaze never left the courtyard. Now I wonder. He spoke almost to himself. Whether true strength has been standing unnoticed all along. Captain Rowan smiled quietly. The people are changing. They smile again. They speak with hope. The king looked toward distant rooftops where smoke curled peacefully into the grey winter sky. Hope. He repeated the word thoughtfully. It has been a long time since this castle carried that feeling. Deep beneath those same walls, hope meant nothing. Hidden below the ancient foundations lay forgotten tunnels older than Frosthaven itself. Moisture dripped steadily from cracked stone ceilings. The air smelled of earth, rust, and something far older. Lord Malrek carried a single lantern. Its weak flame pushed back only a small circle of darkness. He walked confidently through passages few living people even knew existed. At last, he stopped before an enormous iron door covered in ancient runes. Thick chains wrapped across its surface. Each link was etched with faded silver markings. At the center rested a weathered symbol. A black eye surrounded by broken thorns. Malrek slowly removed a heavy key from inside his robes. His hand hesitated. Only for a moment. Then, the lock turned. A deep metallic groan echoed through the chamber. Cold air rushed outward. Not winter cold. Older. Sharper. The lantern flame flickered violently. Beyond the doorway, darkness waited. Not empty darkness. Living darkness. Two enormous crimson eyes slowly opened somewhere far within. A low growl rolled through the underground chamber, shaking dust from the ancient ceiling. Even Malrek instinctively stepped backward. Then he forced himself to stand firm. "You've slept long enough." His voice echoed unnaturally. "I have work for you." The crimson eyes narrowed. A shadow slowly shifted inside the endless black. Not walking. Flowing. Like smoke learning to breathe. The ancient creature had waited centuries beneath the mountain. Bound. Forgotten. Hungry. Now, someone had finally opened its prison. And far above, as snow continued falling peacefully across Frosthaven, neither Ilara nor the Alpha King had any idea that the kingdom's greatest enemy had just awakened beneath their feet. Winter slowly loosened its grip on Frosthaven. The snow still crowned the mountain peaks, but lower valleys awakened beneath the first touch of spring. Thin streams broke free from their icy prisons, carrying melted snow through forests where green shoots pushed bravely through the frozen earth. Birds returned to the pines, their songs filling mornings that had been silent for months. With the changing season came something the kingdom desperately needed. Hope. For the first time since the war, laughter drifted through the streets more often than morning prayers. Blacksmiths hammered plowshares instead of swords. Children played beneath castle walls without glancing nervously toward the gates. The harvest festival was approaching. It was Frosthaven's oldest tradition. Although the fields had only begun to recover from war, the festival was never simply about crops. It celebrated survival. Families gathered to thank the land for carrying them through another winter. Lanterns were hung from every rooftop. Bakers worked through the night, filling the air with the scent of fresh bread, honey cakes, roasted apples, and cinnamon. Musicians tuned weathered violins while craftsmen decorated the streets with carved wooden wolves wrapped in blue ribbons. Even the castle seemed lighter. Servants laughed more freely. Soldiers smiled without realizing it. For a little while, the kingdom remembered what peace felt like. Ilara spent the morning in the royal gardens. Wildflowers had begun blooming beneath the old apple trees, and children wandered among them carrying tiny baskets woven from willow branches. The guardian beast rested nearby beneath a great oak. Its wounds had healed remarkably well. The scars remained, thin silver lines beneath its white coat, but its strength had returned. Several children stood at a careful distance. They stared with wide eyes. One little boy finally gathered enough courage to step forward. "May I?" His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Touch him." Ilara looked toward the great wolf. "I don't know." She smiled. "Let's ask him." The boy frowned. "Ask him." She nodded. Every living creature deserves the chance to choose. The child slowly held out his tiny hand. The guardian watched him quietly. Its great nose lifted slightly, catching the scent of nervous excitement. Then, the enormous wolf stepped forward. It lowered its massive head until its nose gently brushed the child's fingers. The little boy gasped. His fear melted into delighted laughter. Soon another child approached. Then another. The guardian accepted each gentle touch with patient calm. Watching nearby, King Aldrich folded his arms. Captain Rowan smiled beside him. "He's teaching them." The king looked toward him. "The beast?" "No." The captain nodded toward Ilara. "Her." Not everyone welcomed the growing happiness. Deep beneath the castle, Lord Malrek stood once again before the ancient prison. Only this time. This was not what he had intended. The creature had become stronger than its chains. It no longer obeyed. It destroyed friend and foe alike. "No." He whispered. "No." The shadow slowly turned its burning eyes toward the castle. Toward him. It remembered. Its chains. Its prison. The one who had awakened it. It smiled. Malrek stepped backward. For the first time in many years. Fear finally found him. The monster charged. Not toward Ilara. Not toward the king. Toward the castle itself. King Aldrich realized the truth instantly. It wants the Chancellor. The Guardian understood as well. It sprinted across the square. Malrek tried to run. Too late. The shadow reached him first. Its enormous claws closed around the balcony. Stone exploded outward. The Chancellor fell. He screamed as he crashed onto the courtyard below. Alive, but unable to stand. The creature raised one final claw. Then, it stopped. Ilara stood between them. Her breathing came fast. She held no weapon. Only a lantern she had picked up from the broken street. The warm golden light shone against the endless darkness. You've taken enough. Her quiet voice somehow reached across the battlefield. The shadow stared. For one heartbeat, everything became still. Then it laughed. The claw descended. The guardian leaped. It threw itself between Ilara and the monster. The shadow struck with impossible force. A terrible sound echoed through the square. The great white wolf was hurled across the frozen stones. It crashed into the fountain with enough force to shatter solid granite. Silence followed. Ilara's heart stopped. The guardian did not move. For one endless heartbeat. The kingdom forgot how to breathe. The shattered fountain spilled water across the frozen square, and pieces of broken stone slid slowly through the silence. Dust drifted into the cold night air where lanterns still flickered weakly against the darkness. The guardian beast lay motionless beneath the broken marble. Its white coat, so brilliantly clean only days before, had once again been stained with crimson. Ilara stared. The world around her seemed to disappear. The screams. The crashing buildings. The clash of steel. Everything faded beneath the terrible stillness surrounding the creature that had trusted her. No. The word escaped her lips almost without sound. Her legs carried her forward before her mind could catch up. She dropped beside the guardian. One trembling hand brushed away the broken stone covering its shoulder. The fur beneath was warm. Too warm. Fresh blood spread between her fingers. Tears blurred her vision. You promised me, she whispered, though she knew the beast had never spoken a single word. You finally rested. Her voice broke. You weren't supposed to fight again. The guardian's chest rose only slightly. Its breathing had become painfully shallow. Still, its golden eyes opened. Just a little. The great wolf looked at her. Not with fear. Not with pain. Only with quiet reassurance. As though it wished to comfort her. Instead of the other way around. Ilara pressed clean cloth against the deepest wound. Her satchel had fallen during the battle. Her herbs were scattered across the shattered square. Without hesitation, children she had once helped rushed into the dangerous streets. The little boy who had first touched the guardian gathered scattered bandages with shaking hands. The elderly stable master brought clean blankets. The kitchen maid carried boiling water from nearby homes. Even wounded soldiers crawled across the stones, passing herbs from one person to another. No one gave orders. No one hesitated. The kindness Ilara had quietly planted throughout the kingdom was returning to her, one helping hand at a time. King Aldrich watched the people gathering around the fallen guardian. His grip tightened around his sword. 4 years. He had believed loyalty came from duty. Tonight, he witnessed something greater. Love. Not spoken. Not demanded. Earned. He turned toward the shadow creature. Its crimson eyes burned brighter than ever. Darkness continued pouring from its body, swallowing the light around it. The king lifted his sword. With me. His voice echoed across the square. The remaining royal guard answered immediately. Captain Rowan stood beside him despite the blood running from a wound across his forehead. We end this tonight. The soldiers charged. Not because they believed victory was certain. Because their people still stood behind them. Steel flashed beneath the moon. The shadow met them with terrifying force. One sweep of its claws sent warriors crashing across the square. Another shattered the stone steps leading toward the castle. Yet every soldier who could still stand rose again. Again. And again. Because behind them, families still lived. Nearby, Ilara finally found the deepest wound hidden beneath the guardian's shoulder. The blow had broken bone. She closed her eyes. There was only one herb strong enough to stop the bleeding. Moonroot. She searched frantically through the scattered plants. Nothing. She had used the last of it days ago. Her heart sank. The guardian's breathing slowed further. No. She whispered again. Then, A small voice spoke behind her. I know where some grows. It was the little girl whose rabbit Ilara had healed in the castle garden. She pointed toward the royal greenhouse. My grandmother grows it there. Without waiting another second, Ilara stood. Stay with him. She looked toward Captain Rowan. Keep pressure on the wound. The old captain nodded immediately. I will. Ilara ran. She sprinted through smoke-filled streets, past burning market stalls, past frightened families. Every breath burned inside her chest. The greenhouse stood behind the castle gardens. Its glass roof had partially collapsed during the battle. Inside, moonlight spilled across rows of crushed flowers. She searched desperately among overturned pots. Then she saw them. Tiny silver leaves glowing beneath the broken glass. Moonroot. She gathered every stem she could find. As she turned to leave, she froze. Someone stood in the doorway. Lord Malrek. His rich robes were torn. Blood covered one side of his face. His confident smile had disappeared forever. Behind him, the shadow creature approached slowly. Not attacking. Hunting. Malrek stumbled toward Ilara. Help me. His voice shook violently. Please. She stared at him. This man had tried to destroy her. He had released the monster now consuming the kingdom. Yet, he was terrified. Exactly as every frightened creature she had ever helped had been. Ilara stepped forward. Come with me. Malrek looked at her in disbelief. After everything. She answered quietly. No one should die alone. For the first time in many years, the Chancellor lowered his head. Not from pride. From shame. Together they ran back toward the square. The shadow creature followed. Its roar rolled across the city like thunder. Buildings shook. Windows burst. People looked up in horror as darkness swallowed the moon. King Aldrich saw Ilara returning. He saw Malrek beside her. Everything became clear. The creature wanted its betrayer. It would never stop. The king lowered his sword. Then he made a choice. The chains. Captain Rowan looked toward him. The ancient chains. They imprisoned it once. They're beneath the castle. The captain understood immediately. He gathered several soldiers. Together they disappeared into the underground passages. Meanwhile, the battle continued. Ilara crushed the moonroot into a thick paste. Her hands moved quickly despite the tears falling onto the herbs. She packed the medicine deep into the guardian's wound. Fresh bandages followed. Then another layer. Then another. Minutes passed. Nothing changed. The guardian remained still. Ilara gently rested her forehead against the wolf's. You carried everyone. Her voice trembled. Please. Let someone carry you now. A single tear slipped from her cheek onto the guardian's white fur. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the wolf inhaled deeply. Its chest rose. Its eyes slowly opened. A weak breath escaped its nose. Relief swept through the gathered crowd. Some laughed. Others openly cried. The little children hugged one another. Captain Rowan smiled through exhausted eyes. The guardian lived. The shadow creature roared with fury. Darkness exploded outward once more. It charged directly toward Ilara. The guardian tried to stand. Its wounded legs trembled. Still, it placed itself between her and the monster. The shadow struck. Before the blow landed, heavy iron chains flew through the air. Captain Rowan and the soldiers had returned. Ancient silver runes glowed along every link. The chains wrapped around the creature's arms. Then its neck. Then its chest. The monster fought wildly. Stone cracked beneath its strength. The runes blazed brighter. King Aldrich drove his sword into the center of the glowing seal engraved upon the chains. Light burst across the square. The shadow screamed. Not with anger. With defeat. Darkness peeled away from its body like smoke scattered by a powerful wind. Its enormous form shrank. Twisted. Collapsed inward. Until nothing remained. Except a handful of black ash carried away by the night breeze. Silence returned. True silence. For the first time since the battle began, the stars became visible again. Lord Malrek fell to his knees before the king. He did not attempt to flee. There is no excuse. His voice sounded empty. I feared losing power more than losing my people. He slowly removed a leather satchel hidden beneath his robes. Inside lay dozens of sealed documents. Letters. Royal decrees. False orders. Secret payments. Records of stolen grain, hidden taxes, poisoned alliances, and battles deliberately prolonged to increase his influence. I wrote them all. He placed them at the king's feet. I condemned innocent villages. His shoulders shook. I created wars that never needed to happen. The people listened in stunned silence. No one interrupted. Truth itself had become punishment. King Aldrich looked down at the broken man. You will answer for every name written here. Malrek nodded. I know. Royal guards gently lifted him to his feet. No chains were needed. The weight of his own guilt had become heavier than iron. In the weeks that followed, spring fully arrived. Snow melted from the valleys. Rivers flowed freely once again. Fields slowly turned green beneath warm sunlight. The kingdom began healing. Not only its buildings, its heart. King Aldrich stood before the people in the castle courtyard. The entire kingdom had gathered. Farmers, merchants, soldiers, children, widows. He spoke without standing upon the throne. Instead, he stood among them. This kingdom survived because one woman refused to believe kindness was weakness. His eyes found Ilara. She stood quietly beside the guardian beast, wearing the same simple cloak she had arrived in weeks before. The king continued. We have built walls. We have forged swords. We have trained armies. He smiled gently, but none of them saved Frosthaven. He looked toward the people. Compassion did. The crowd erupted into applause. Many wiped tears from their faces. Others simply smiled. The king offered Ilara gold. She declined. He offered her a noble title. She bowed respectfully. I already have everything I need. He thought for a moment, then smiled. Then allow me to build what you would never ask for. Across the kingdom, new sanctuaries were created. Places where wounded animals could recover beside injured travelers. Gardens filled with healing herbs replaced abandoned training grounds. Young healers were taught that every life carried value. The first sanctuary stood beside the old cedar tree where Malin had once found a crying infant beneath the snow. Its entrance bore no royal crest. Only a single carving. A great white wolf lowering its head toward an open hand. Months later, one quiet evening, Ilara walked through elderpine forest. The air smelled of pine and wildflowers. Sunlight filtered gently between ancient branches. The guardian beast padded silently beside her. No armor. No battle. No blood. Only peace. They reached the old cedar tree. Ilara rested one hand against its rough bark. I wish you could see this. She smiled softly, thinking of Malin. You were right. A warm breeze stirred the leaves overhead. High above, a white feather drifted slowly through the sunlight. It landed gently at her feet. She looked upward. For a moment, the forest felt wonderfully alive. The guardian lifted its head toward the mountains. Somewhere beyond the distant peaks, another wolf answered with a long, peaceful howl. The great beast looked toward Ilara. She smiled. Go on. It hesitated only briefly, then bounded gracefully through the trees, disappearing into the endless northern wilderness before stopping atop a distant ridge. There it turned. Golden eyes met hers one final time. Not a farewell. A promise. Wherever kindness walked, the guardian would never truly be far away. And long after the battles, the betrayals, and the shadows had faded into history, parents across Frosthaven still gathered their children beside warm fires on winter nights and told them the story of the quiet healer who had washed the Alpha King's beast when everyone else feared to touch it. They always ended the tale the same way. Not by praising the strength of kings. Not by celebrating great victories in war. but by reminding every listening child that the gentlest hands often carry the greatest power, and that a single act of compassion can change the fate of an entire kingdom.